Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and welcome to the Breaking News. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and support us on Patreon, link in the description below. Today we've been able to get breaking news from the areas of western Yemen, as we were able to hear from a Yemeni Houthi spokesperson that they fired anti-ship missiles at Carrier Strike Group 3, which houses the USS Abraham Lincoln, as well as the remainder of its Carrier Strike Group that is currently within the area of the Western Arabian Sea. From what we understand, the United States Department of Defense has not made an official comment about the strike so far, but nevertheless, it does seem that the Houthis are trying to escalate another major diplomatic or international incident with the United States Navy and the United States of America as a whole in support of the Islamic Republic of Iran's proxy conflict with the state of Israel. Once again, a major escalation if we have ever seen one. Moving on into the area, meanwhile, of Dania inside of southern Beirut in Lebanon, we have been able to hear that the Israeli Air Force is continuing to conduct key strikes against major outposts and installations of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as well as Hezbollah. From what we understand, these airstrikes are once again dealing crippling blows to those armed forces of the Iranian Proxy forces, and it does seem as though that the Israeli armed forces will continue to make their slow, grinding, and methodical process within the areas of southern Lebanon far easier for themselves, as Hezbollah and the IRGC is greatly reduced in their combat and logistical abilities as this conflict is continuing on forwards. Meanwhile, we've also been able to hear of some major strikes happening by Ukraine inside of Belgorod, as a major Russian oil depot ended up being stricken and destroyed overnight in another deep Ukrainian drone strike. It appears that the Ukrainian armed forces are beginning to revitalize their strategy of targeting and destroying Russian oil and oil fuel sorts of strikes that are meant to completely immobilize the Russian Federation both economically and militarily and force them to the peace negotiating table under Ukrainian terms. At the exact same time, within the area of southern Ukraine, we have also been seeing that Ukrainian armed forces have been putting up valiant defensive efforts and stopping the Russian Federation from continuing their advance through the remainder of the southern Donetsk Oblast. From what we are seeing, it does appear that the Russians are taking fairly high losses and that the Ukrainians are, of course, holding their ground quite well. Although it does seem as though Russian efforts are being greatly ramped up in preparation for what may be coming in down the pipe in the future, which may be a possible round of peace negotiations. Meanwhile, inside of Poland, we've been able to hear that the Polish have stated that they will not be shooting down any drones fired by the Russians, even if they enter Polish airspace, according to a statement from a high-level Polish official today. We have also been able to hear inside of France that they will be not only providing 3 Mirage 2000s come at the beginning of 2025, they will now be providing an entire 6 Mirage 2000s, which will be a massive boost to the Ukrainians' air defense efforts, and not only that, help the Ukrainians to once again be able to put up a strong foot forward, at least in terms of asserting their air supremacy over their own skies. We have a major amount of news, and not only that, we have also been able to get a little tiny update from Taiwan, and it's just the littlest of updates, as we were able to hear that Taiwan worked with U.S. mediators to pack up and ship hundreds of Hawk surface-to-air missiles from their own Hawk missile defense systems and into Ukraine, where we believe that they're going to be using these air defense missiles in support of their air defense efforts against the Russian Federation, meaning that Taiwan is actually sacrificing some of its own air defense abilities to support a united front against the Axis powers inside of the Asian European continental area. We have loads of news to cover today, and we're going to be moving into the first bit right here, with the United States Carrier Strike Group 3 being attacked today by the Yemeni Houthis. This is a fairly interesting sort of a claim that was made by the Yemeni Houthis today, and we do want to say that we are taking this at face value, considering that the Yemeni Houthis really have no reason to embellish a claim like this, because the United States could come out and immediately refute it, and so far in the past we have seen that the Yemeni Houthis and their spokespeople usually make claims about attacks that actually did happen. And according to what we've been able to hear, the Yemeni Houthis have claimed a missile and drone attack on the USS Abraham Lincoln in the area of the Arabian Sea. The incident should have been in the context of rising tensions in the Middle East, where Iran and its proxies, including the Houthis, are engaged in a standoff with the United States and its allies. Most importantly, it's a little bit more beneficial to understand why the strike would have been conducted. Of course, there are high tensions in the area, but what would have been the goal of the Yemeni Houthis conducting the strike against a U.S. carrier group, or a U.S. strike group, as this one is particularly called, bearing the name Strike Group 3? We understand that the Yemeni Houthis, of course, operate very closely with the Islamic Republic of Iran, as Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Yemeni Houthis are directly funded and supported by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is a direct part of the Iranian government and is pretty much the armed wing of the Iranian government as a whole. This means that any actions that are made by the Yemeni Houthis while not being directly Iran's actions, largely represent Iran's interests and actions whenever they are conducted. And the fact that they are trying to once again escalate by conducting a missile and drone attack against the United States aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln is giving us an idea that they are trying to escalate the diplomatic tensions higher to see if there's some way that they can start to force some sort of diplomatic negotiations inside of the Middle East. This is something that we have seen before in the past. We have seen that Yemeni drones, in particular, have targeted U.S. destroyers transiting the area of the southern Red Sea, as well as the Gulf of Aden. So this is nothing that's new or unfamiliar to the United States Navy. However, it attacking a carrier strike group is something that's entirely new. The USS Abraham Lincoln Strike Group is a fairly modernized one as far as we can tell. It does house the USS Abraham Lincoln, which is a Nimitz-class aircraft carrier, and I'll be making sure to get you all a picture of the USS Abraham Lincoln right here so that way you can see a little bit better of what the USS Abraham Lincoln is. It's this aircraft carrier right here, but it is also accompanied, from what we understand, according to public information, by 3 or 4, we are assuming at the moment only 3 though, Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers. We are able to understand that the guided missile destroyers largely provide the bulk of the air defense for the the Nimitz-class aircraft carriers like the USS Abraham Lincoln that we're seeing right here, and according to the additional information that we would be able to extrapolate from this, we would assume that most of the air defense actions were conducted by the the American Arleigh Burke-class destroyers that are a part of this carrier strike group, and not the USS Abraham Lincoln itself. This still is a major incident, as the USS Abraham Lincoln, if the air defense had somehow failed, or these anti-ship missiles were just too slippery for the naval-based air defense systems to catch them, they could have possibly hit the USS Abraham Lincoln and caused a serious amount of damage. Luckily, no damage has been caused, and we have not been able to hear any Department of Defense statements here in America about this attack yet, as the attack only happened, according to the Yemeni Houthis, just a few hours ago. And usually it takes around a half day to an entire day, or even several days in some rare instances, for the U.S. Department of Defense to come out and state that anything has happened at all. It is particularly when it comes to U.S. naval assets that are in the area of the Middle East. Nevertheless, this is a major escalatory incident, and we are going to be keeping a very close eye on U.S. naval operations within the area, or largely U.S. armed operations in the area, as we have seen in the past when these attacks were really starting to reach their fever pitch for a short while. The United States and the United Kingdom both conducted joint airstrikes against the Yemeni Houthis-controlled territory around the city of Sana'a, as well as Al-Hodeida, causing serious damage to Yemeni Houthi ground force abilities, as well as anti-ship abilities, at least in the short term, before they were resupplied again by the IRGC, and it appears that they now once again have abilities to be able to reach out and attempt strikes at not only merchant shipping, but also U.S. naval shipping and assets within the area as well. Moving on from that, though, and into the area of Dahiyeh inside of southern Lebanon, or really southern Beirut, we were able to see that more airstrikes are still being conducted by the Israeli Air Force within this region. And here's one of the clips right here. And we can see the smoke rising from the airstrike in the distance. A larger ordnance being used. And from what we are hearing, the Israelis are attempting to bomb out Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, as well as Hezbollah forces that are within this area and still trying to operate some of their headquarters within the area of southern Lebanon, or really southern Beirut in particular. From what we know, Hezbollah has set up most of their permanent bunkers and command systems within the southern suburbs of Beirut, fairly close to the Beirut International Airport. This is practically the nucleus of Hezbollah and IRGC forces, and their operations within southern Lebanon, which are still ongoing at this moment against the Israeli Defense Forces. The Israelis, while still moving forward on the ground within the southern area of Lebanon, are attempting to try and confuse or discombobulate those forces as much as physically possible. And an easy way to do that is to be able to try and strike and destroy the Hezbollah leadership that is still inside of Beirut and trying to command those forces within the south. Without proper or effective leadership, those ground forces in the south will be far more confused and disoriented. They will not have a unified or a very cohesive battle plan within that area, and it'll make it far easier to engage, isolate, and destroy specific parts of Hezbollah one piece at a time, making it way easier for the Israeli Defense Forces to continue on northwards and towards the Litani River, which is just south of Nabatea, which is this town within side of southern Lebanon. We are also seeing as well, not only are airstrikes being conducted, we were able to hear once again more statements being made and damage being shown within the area of southern Beirut, showing the Israeli airstrikes and the kind of damage that they have posed to the city. The suburbs of southern Beirut are practically a ghost town at this point, as the Israeli Defense Forces did make a very short notice a little while ago that all Lebanese citizens inside the area of southern Beirut were to evacuate, as they were going to be conducting airstrikes in this area for some time, attempting to knock out and destroy Hezbollah leadership as well as key Hezbollah infrastructure. And it does appear that the entire area has been evacuated, as we're not seeing a single person in the area.
حطوا العزانة يا عمرو عشان ما حدا يدعوس عليهم.
We can see them continuing to show the damage and debris throughout this area of the city. Once again, hardly a person seen in the entire area. That's the end of that clip, but still giving us a much closer glimpse at the kind of damage that these airstrikes are beginning to pose to the area of Dahia within inside of southern Beirut. From what we largely understand, the United States of America will continue to back Israel without question well into the future. And we are also understanding that the Islamic Republic of Iran may be ordering its proxy forces, including the Yemeni Houthis, to begin these wildly escalatory strikes against the United States to try and force either some sort of a larger conflict where they might be able to get the backing of the Russian Federation or the People's Republic of China, although we consider that option to be highly unlikely. The Russian Federation could join, but the People's Republic of China going out of its way to join this ground conflict, or really this entire conflict as a whole, would be somewhat unlikely, considering that the Chinese still do not have the force projection abilities to be able to really conduct any kind of meaningful or sizable actions within the area of the Middle East. They do have a small outpost inside of Djibouti, which pretty much everyone does in the world right now, but nevertheless, it's not really a big enough one to say that the entirety of the Chinese Navy could be supported and operated out of this small base inside of Djibouti. And not only that, the entirety of the People's Liberation Army would have to be operated out of that one base. There's really no way for them to easily conduct any support in this kind of conflict if they were to side with Iran, so we're considering that that option is a little unlikely. However, the Russian Federation backing up the Iranians is a little bit more likely, as geographically they are far closer to the Islamic Republic of Iran and have been heavily involved in the Middle East for about the past decade, specifically in support of the Bashar al-Assad regime inside of Syria. For this reason, we are understanding that possible Russian involvement may materialize in the future if the Iranians were to force some sort of a major incident inside of the area, but for the moment we are largely anticipating that the Iranians will still be on their own and are sort of acting out in attempts of desperation to see if they can draw the United States and Israel to the diplomatic negotiating table before things get far worse. And in some instances it looks as though they were quite truly creating the situations that are going to be far worse, as I really don't know what other way the United States will respond to an attempted attack on a U.S. carrier strike group by the Houthis than to obliterate the Houthis probably by next week. But moving on out of the area of southern Lebanon, we are now going to be moving on into the area of the Russian Federation, as we have been able to hear that the Ukrainians have conducted another long-range drone strike into the territory of Belgorod and have actually hit a major oil depot within this area. We were able to see a little bit of news that was published by the Kyiv Independent about this particular topic, as we were able to hear that Ukrainian drone strikes oil depots inside of Russia's Belgorod Oblast, according to the local officials, and Ukrainian forces have launched a series of drone strikes aimed at damaging Russia's oil industry, whose profits fuel the Russian war efforts. We do not know the specific oil depot that has been hit. We've only actually heard this from Belgorod Oblast authorities, and we've not been able to geolocate the exact area where this oil depot has been hit. hit, but apparently it was such a severe and devastating hit to that specific depot that the oblast's authorities had to come out and make a direct statement addressing this situation. We are starting to see that the Ukrainians are once again ramping up their oil infrastructure attacks a lot like they were at the beginning of this year, and we are believing that this will carry on throughout the winter months and probably into the early spring as the Ukrainians once again try and drive a stake into the Russian oil industry's heart and knock it out once and for all. The Russian Federation is a monolithic economy, largely revolving around its oil production. During the times of the Soviet Union, the economy was a little bit more diversified, but once again monolithic, as in it existed entirely within its heavy industries, and there was really no profits or any kind of economic value to anything else inside the Soviet Union. Once the Soviet Union collapsed, the large and incredibly complicated supply chains that existed throughout the entirety of the Soviet Union and all of its republics completely fell apart, and this meant that a lot of these countries had to start relying on the monolithic kind of economic structure that they had within their specific republic without the support of the rest of the Soviet Union. In some instances, like with the Russian Federation, this meant that they leaned entirely into the oil production side of things, and that was it. There's really nothing else that exists in the Russian Federation these days except for major amounts of oil production. For other countries, like some of the smaller Stan series countries like Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan, they actually prioritize in rare materials, rare minerals, and rare metals that are able to draw them some national income. Kazakhstan is also much like the Russian Federation, pretty much drawing most of their money from oil production, and that's it. And other countries like Ukraine ended up becoming a largely monolithic economy in forms of their agricultural industry, as well as in some rare instances, their technological industries, although the technological industries mostly collapsed at the end of the Soviet Union because they were no longer connected to the wildly complicated supply chains that existed that allowed for resources to be drawn across the entirety of the Soviet Union and into Ukraine, meaning that Ukraine largely started to rely on agriculture to make most of their national income. For this reason, not just on Ukraine, but really on the Russian Federation, it makes it very easy to triangulate and destroy the key economic component that keeps the Russians alive. And if the Ukrainians keep this up, we may see that Russian economic backslides continue at the same pace that they have been for a while now, and will continue to wreak havoc on the Russian financial institutions, and not only that, on the Russian central government's ability to wage the war in Ukraine, possibly putting the Ukrainians in a much better position if peace talks are to come around in the future. And speaking of peace talks, the diplomatic tensions in between the Russian Federation and the United States appear to be on a little bit of a higher end. But whether it's on a high end or not, the fact that negotiations may be coming around the corner is starting to see both sides ramp up their abilities and their efforts to try and reclaim territory and get it back from one side or the other, or for the Russians to claim more territory from Ukraine, which they have specifically been trying to do inside the Kursk Oblast, and not only that, within the area around Pokrovsk, specifically the area that is still a part of the Donetsk Oblast that is within Ukrainian control. From what we are seeing, the Russian Federation is continuing their offensive efforts towards Kurakovy and trying to advance towards the border of the Donetsk Oblast that is still under Ukrainian control. We are seeing that the Ukrainians are putting up a very large amount of resistance, and I will not be able to show you all the entirety of this clip that is right down here. But we were able to see that a Ukrainian Leopard 2A4 and several other vehicles were conducting direct fire on a Russian column that was advancing towards one of the towns south of Kurakovy and attempting to stop them dead in their tracks. From what we are understanding, most Russian offensives are still taking incredibly high losses, but the Russians are making very small land gains around Kurakovy at the moment as their offensive is slowly grinding forward, although at incredibly high losses, making a small amount of gain. Unless if the Russian Federation is able to claim the entirety of the Donetsk Oblast, we believe that the position of the negotiating table would pretty much be the exact same as it would be right now, as claiming an additional 3 miles of land inside of the Donetsk Oblast without claiming the entire thing literally puts them in the same position they're in now. That amount of ground gain compared to what's already controlled by both sides in the Donetsk Oblast is practically insignificant. The Donetsk Oblast is pretty much split half and half by the Ukrainians and the Russians at the moment, where the active front line is, and for that reason, if they went to the diplomatic negotiating table, it wouldn't matter if they claimed that they took Kurakovy, because half of the Donetsk Oblast would still be under direct Ukrainian control, and the Russians claim that they legally control and own the entirety of the Donetsk Oblast, lost would easily be disputed, considering that they haven't even taken all of it from the Ukrainians, and much less than that, the Ukrainians did control it before the invasion in 2022, and also the annexation of Crimea, and then the conflict in the Donbass in 2014. But moving on out of that news, we are starting to hear that the Polish are, interestingly enough, beginning to back off a little bit from their escalatory statements that have been made in the past, including their statements and threats that they would begin to shoot down Russian drones and missiles that possibly or were violating the airspace of the Republic of Poland. We have heard that a senior Polish official today has come out and stated that they will not be shooting down drones and missiles over Ukraine. And that was according to the chief of the general staff, Kukula, who stated that no, our allies and our position is clear. We will not do this. And today, our responsibility for protecting the Allied sky is determined by our borders. It does seem as though the Polish may be trying to continue on with the idea that they will shoot down Russian drones and missiles over their own skies, although that still has met a lot of flack and resistance diplomatically by countries like the United States. Nevertheless, it appears that it's very clear at this point that the Polish will not get involved in shooting down Russian drones and missiles over Western Ukraine's skies. It seems that that is a diplomatic threshold that they're not willing to cross yet, and once again, the Ukrainians will be left to entirely defend their own airspace 100% alone. However, inside of France, it does seem as though they will be getting help with supporting their air defense efforts and trying to make sure that's a little bit more fleshed out, as we are hearing that the French are going to be providing another 3 Mirage 2000s. This is a fairly big deal, as we are hearing that they will supply them with 6 Mirage 2005Fs. These are fairly competent. These are actually a lot more competent than the original Mirage 2000s that we heard they were going to be provided. The Mirage 2000 is the mainstay of the French Air Force, and is generally the aircraft that the French Air Force, throughout most of the past 50 years really, has pulled upon to be able to have some form of air power in its own right. The Mirage 2000 is technically a multi-role aircraft, and it does fill the role of a multi-role aircraft, but nevertheless, it largely is more so specialized in the air-to-air role, not really the air-to-ground role. There are some specialized versions of the Mirage 2000 that pretty much turn it into a bomber or a ground support aircraft, like the Mirage 2000D. But we originally heard from the French a while ago that they were going to be providing 3 Mirage 2000Cs, and you can actually see one of these pictured right here. The Mirage 2000C is truly almost a complete air-to-air variant of the Mirage 2000, and it was one of the first to enter service. These Mirage 2000s are capable of using the most advanced French air-to-air missiles, including the Magic, I think the Magic 2s and the Magic 3s, which I think they're using nowadays, as well as the, I believe they're called the Mika EMs, which is their version of an AMRAAM, or something similar to an AIM-120. However, the Mirage 2000 wasn't really good in the air-to-ground role, and we do know that because the French then later modified the Mirage 2000C, or really the entirety of the aircraft, into the Mirage 2005F, and I'm trying to see if I can find you all a Mirage 2005F somewhere within the pictures right here on Wikipedia, and hopefully we can find this here really soon. And it doesn't appear that they like to show pictures of this one, but nevertheless, to try and cut this short and explain the big difference in between the Mirage 2000C and the Mirage 2000F is that the Mirage 2005F, as you're seeing right here, actually started to convert it into an air-to-ground role, and not only that, made sure that the Mirage 2000 would be able to use the most advanced air-to-air weapon systems that were in use. And while the Mirage 2000 could use some of the most advanced French missiles, like some of the Magics, which are shorter range, and I believe those would be Fox 3s, the Mirage 2005F is also able to carry the Mika EM, which I was talking about a little while earlier. This is actually a super Matra that you see under the wing here on the Mirage 2000C, and with the Mirage 2005F upgrade, not only is it much better in the air-to-ground role if they wanted it to be, but it also can carry an even more advanced complement of air-to-air weapon systems, which is really where you see the most efficiency being made in modern air combat, is how efficient and how modern are the missiles on board these aircraft. Not only that, they're upping the number from 3 to 6, so it's a huge upgrade by the French and will be greatly helping out the Ukrainians in securing their skies against the Russian Federation and stopping future attacks from being as successful. So far, we've seen that the Ukrainian air defense averages have dropped down to around 75 to 80% so far, meaning that for every 100 drones that is fired into Ukraine, around 20 to 25 of those will be able to make it to their target and will be able to make landfall. The Ukrainians are trying to once again up their air defense success rates up into the area around 85 to 90% from what we're understanding, which means that the amount of damage posed by Russian air attacks would be nominal at that point, or marginal really is the best way to put it, and it wouldn't be causing that much of an issue for the Ukrainians going forward. Any amount of damage that the Ukrainians can mitigate is a big deal, and the provision of another 6 Mirage 2000s to Ukraine will be greatly helping them to not only defend their skies, but also possibly support limited close air support actions around the areas of Ukrainian controlled territory in the Donbass, as well as in the area of Zaporizhzhia and Kherson, although we haven't really seen the F-16 used in that manner yet, and so we're not really sure how the Ukrainians will be using them in an offensive role, but we do know that they'll be using them heavily in a defensive role, as we are also understanding that the F-16s are also used in a very similar, heavily defensive-based role so far inside of Ukraine, defending their skies. But nevertheless, that is all of the, well, actually, that is not all of it. That is not all of the news. We have to actually go over to Taiwan, because speaking of air defense and defending their skies, apparently Taiwan has given a massive lifeline to the Ukrainian air defense, as the United States and Taiwan mediated together the transfer of loads of Hawk surface-to-air missile systems, as well as their missiles. These surface-to-air missile systems are somewhat older, and they're not the most advanced or greatest kind of air defense system that the Western world has to offer. But nevertheless, these things are absolutely incredible when one is looking for an inexpensive yet relatively effective form of air defense to be able to provide for one's country. According to what we know, the Ukrainians are going to be receiving an entire 15 Hawk batteries from Taiwan. This may be putting the Taiwanese further at risk of possible Chinese aggression in the future and a possible air attack by the Chinese in the form of missiles fired into the airspace of Taiwan. Nevertheless, the Taiwanese appear to be making a concerted effort to show a united front in support of the Western world against the Axis powers of the Russian Federation, the People's Republic of China, North Korea, and Iran. It's a very interesting kind of a move. We actually never expected that the Taiwanese would make that sort of a move, but nevertheless, Ukraine has one of its biggest allies in the world currently inside of another country that is facing a very similar threat to the one Ukraine is facing right now. And of course, with that bombshell, it is the end of this news segment. I have to thank every single one of y'all so much once again for watching. It is always an honor and a pleasure to be able to get out the breaking news to each and every one of y'all, and if y'all have enjoyed it so far, please make sure to subscribe. I've got to tell y'all this time and time again, and it's true, YouTube does not care about subscribers on a YouTube channel anymore. Years ago they used to, and that would actually help you out in the YouTube algorithm in promoting you to other people to watch, but nowadays YouTube just does not care. YouTube largely cares more so on if you made a good video or not than if your channel's a big one or not. So for that reason, subscribers don't really matter. But subscribers make us really happy whenever we see y'all subscribe, because while YouTube doesn't care, we care greatly that people actually want to hear from us and hear more news from us in particular. Y'all can get news from all over the place, but some people really do like the way we deliver it. And by subscribing, y'all show us that y'all truly do enjoy our specific delivery and our specific kind of news that we have to put out, and y'all want to hear more about it. And that always makes us incredibly happy. Not only that, if you really liked it, please make sure to hit that like button. And not only that, if you have made it to this point of the video, please make sure to put rock in the chat, in the comments section below. That is R-O-C, not spelled like rock, like a rock, but rock is in R-O-C, because R-O-C stands for the Republic of China, which is actually the official name of Taiwan as a completely separate country from communist China on the mainland. And considering that they have done such an amazing thing today, from what we finally heard, in providing loads of Hawk surface-to-air missile systems in support of Ukraine, I think a lot of people would be really happy to see that the Lee Spring Army and everyone on YouTube, for that matter, that's watching this video really appreciates the efforts of the Republic of China, as Taiwan is officially called, and the communist Chinese wouldn't like people to hear. So make sure to put ROC down in the comment section below to let us know that you made it to this point of the video at the very end, and that you watched the entire thing and hopefully enjoyed it. But with that, one more thing before I go. If you really enjoyed the video, no one has to do this, but it really does help us out a great deal. You can support us on Patreon. The link is in the description below. It helps these video projects to be possible each and every single day, and if it wasn't for the folks who supported us, we would not be able to do this as a full-time job. Me and Enforcer Matt work on this thing pretty much 60 to 70 hours a week each. This is our entire life for the large part. Not only that, our only job. This is the only way that we make a living because we spend so much time on it. And the folks who support this channel help us to be able to make this thing a reality for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people every single day and then every single month. And so we got to give a massive shout out and a huge thanks to everyone who currently is supporting us over on Patreon, and also a big thanks to anyone who may go and support us on Patreon from this video. But still, nevertheless, a big thanks to you all once again for watching, and we will see you all in the next one.